Hi, Suzette Morrow, your art guide on the side. Today we're going to make a clay fox that's sleeping, and at the end I'll show you how to also make a clay fox that is using the hollowed out method. It kind of inspired me because we live in the forest and our neighbor had a gray fox that was sleeping in his tree in the yard. So I decided today would be a great day to bring you along while I make a gray fox or two in my collection that I'm creating for the galleries. We're going to use basic pinch pot techniques. We're going to just use a few tools. Anything that makes a scratch mark, you can use a fork, anything you've got that's sharp. This little scoring tool is used to attach parts, and that helps to keep things together because when you fire it, it shrinks. So those parts will go like this. If you don't score them, they'll pull apart and then things will fall off. All right, this is our slip. It's just got water and clay in there. Some people don't like to use slip. They just use water. That's fine too. Some people just use vinegar as well. All right, so here we go. We have just a lump of clay. This is high fire clay. So I'm going to break it into two pieces. I'm going to make two pinch pots and then I'm going to put them together. So you're going to start with making your pinch pot round with it being somewhat smooth. Okay, of course I would take more time and spend some care making it for you. Now I'm putting one thumb in, and then I'm going to put the other thumb in too. But the problem that people often have is they'll put their thumbs apart and they end up with a plate instead of a bowl shape in their pinch pot. So keep your thumbs together. See how my thumbs are together? They're not apart like this. And that will help you to make your pinch pot evenly thickness walls. So your goal is to try to get that pinch pot by moving it round and round into a equal thickness of walls without smashing your thumb through or making one part thick and one part thin for the walls. All right, and I'm still keeping my thumbs together. See how it's still a bowl shape? And then if you want to, if it gets bigger than your hand, you can cup it with one hand and pinch and turn with the other hand. That also helps you to get that even thickness, and it helps a lot tactily to feel it without looking at it. That way you can start sensing how thick is this part and how thick is this other part. All right. Okay, so we got this one pretty good. We never want to have our clay thicker than one thickness of a knuckle. That's about an inch. So anytime that your pinch pot is thinner than an inch, you're okay. Thinner, depending on what you're making with it. If this was going to be an actual cup, we obviously wouldn't want it to just be this thick and rough on the top, but we're going to be putting two pinch pots together. So we're going to lay this one aside, and now we're going to do our second one. So grab your other ball of clay. It can be a little bit smaller or bigger, it doesn't really matter. You can always shape it the way you want it to be. I'm going to start by making the hole in the center with my thumb, and I am going to, I already wedged this clay too because it's been in the bag for a while I've been recuperating from hip surgery, so it was pretty stiff. So I wedged it for a bit. That kind of reactivates it, gets it a little bit more mushy. If your clay is too dry, then when you're doing this, it will crack a lot. If it's too wet, then it's going to leave a lot of clay on your hands and be real slimy. So this clay has low grog in it. That means that there's not as many tiny bits of clay in the wet clay mixed with it. So it gets pretty tiny, fine details. But some clays that you work with are more for sculpture, for larger things, and they have more grog in them so that you can build things that are taller and bigger without them starting to collapse. So I work with mostly sculpture clay in bigger forms, and then this clay for smaller forms. All right, so we have our second pinch pot. Now we are going to score it. It doesn't matter what direction you go. You just need to rough up those two areas that you're going to put together. So instead of putting together like two pancakes, you're putting together two like hair combs, because all of those particles do now have areas where they can grab onto the other ones, and they're going to do this instead of just this. Okay, so we're gonna this clay is really wet, but if yours is a little bit dry, you might want to put some slip on there. I'm not too worried about it because we're working with some pretty wet clay here now that I've got it net wedged. See how I'm kind of pushing it together, pushing it together. It has a pretty deep indentation right here, but we're gonna fix that. But the more that you make sure that you have those two areas really good, firmly put together, then you know that you've got a nice seam. Now you can use your thumb and work the clay together so that you've got all of those seams really well attached. If you want to, you can put in a little bit of extra clay, like, you know, into a crack. Totally up to you. We're just going to keep working this clay gently, getting rid of that seam. You can use your tool too if you like. You can blend it together. Your job is to make sure that those two halves don't come apart. All right. Okay, now this is going to now become a hollow body. A hollow body that is going to be our sleeping little fox. So see how I'm kind of patting it down. He's going to be sleeping, all curled up, and we have a body form. Okay, now we're going to get some other clay and we're going to attach his head and his tail and kind of make more details of his curled up little body. You don't need a lot. We just need to suggest his. See that kind of leg starts sticking out there. Now we're going to add clay for his nose. Remember our rule of not 1 inch more, right? But we have a fox nose that's pretty long and pretty skinny. So we want his tail to probably come up. You know, we're going to make a super small pinch pot for his head. The way that we can tell he's a fox is by his little ears, kind of big. If you make the ears thicker than you think you're going to need them, then when you slip and score them on, you can always trim them down and make them thinner from the inside of the ear. It's really, really important that you attach all of your pieces together by blending them together. Don't just stick it on there and call it a day, but use your tool to blend together to smooth the parts that you add on to your pinch pot head. It helps a lot too if you make the whole head in your hand first before you attach it onto your main body of your fox. Don't forget that you need to slip and score all your pieces together unless it's really wet clay. If it's really wet clay, then you can usually blend it together and it does okay. Now when you go to put your head on of your fox to the body, make sure that you score the head and you score the body, and that there's a hole in it so that the air can be released between the head and the body. And then blend it in super good. Make sure that you have a hole that is open to the bottom side of your pinch pot and that you smooth the bottom of it nicely so that it is just as well done as the top. You can finish up with eye details and making texture with fur. The tail texture is going to have longer hair and therefore is easier to do than the body. You'll need to probably wait a little while or else the clay will just ball up and not make the hair marks for the texture. So you can let it sit for a little while before you try to put the texture of the fur on if it's too wet. All right, the last step that we're gonna do for our little fox here is to make sure that we have a fur texture. So you can do that in a lot of different ways. You can use a tool that has multiple scratching on it, but you wanna make sure and go the direction that the fur would go on your animal. Don't go this direction when the fur doesn't lay that way on your fox. And then to make sure that you have a different texture for the fox tail, you want to make sure and use a different tool
so that the fox's tail has more long kind of hairs that have a different, thicker texture than the body hair. And don't forget to put the fur marks on his ears as well, and then you can use whatever tool you want to make some eyes. So this is our final piece. He has a hole in the bottom so that it can get air in there to release the air from inside and dry evenly. I'll let him dry a little bit more and then make sure that I didn't smash down any of the little pieces of clay that stick to him when it's wet and you're making texture. Okay. Now for our bonus, remember our bonus at the end is another way that you can create a fox is to create it as a solid mass. So if this was the solid piece of clay and I created a quick sketch of the fox sitting down with his tail and did all the work, but then I'm going to turn it over and use a loop tool to then take out all of the insides. It's called hollowing out method. And as long as you can get pretty much that thinner thickness and one thickness of your finger in the inside of that piece, then you're going to be good to go to be able to fire it. So this is the hollowing out method. That's your bonus tip for your other way that you could make a fox with clay. All right, thanks for joining me. I hope to see you in the next video. Please let me know down in the comments if you like clay videos and you want to know how to make something with clay, then give that a note in the section down below. All right, thanks.